Everyone, call the regular meeting of the Bucksport Town Council for Thursday, August the 3rd to order. This meeting obviously is being held in person. It can also be viewed on local cable channel 1303 or also on the internet by accessing the town website at bucksportmaine.gov and clicking on the agenda and minutes tab and then selecting the council meeting and clicking on video. Questions or comments may be submitted prior to or during the meeting by emailing slassard@bucksportmaine.gov or during the meeting by calling 469-7368. This would be a great time if you have an electronic device turned on to either silence it or turn it off. A couple of housekeeping things before we get starting, just so that everybody is aware. We've had a couple of emergencies this evening. For lack of a better word, with councilors and Mayor Stewart was a planned absence. So there's only 4 of us this evening, so there is a quorum, but I do want to make sure that we're all clear on something. In order for something to be approved, it will have to be a 4-0 vote. Okay? All right, I think we're good. Call the roll, Jacob.
Councilor Eastman.
Present.
Councilor Morrison is absent. Deputy Mayor Bissonnette.
Here.
Mayor Stewart is absent. Councilor Ormsby is absent. Councilor Bishop.
Here.
Councilor Rankin.
Here.
Thank you. Presentation of any town council recognition. I'm not seeing any. Next is consider minutes of previous meetings. We have the town council minutes for July 27th, 2023. Just before we take action on that, I just want to, I have mentioned to Jacob that I spotted what appears to, I would call a typographical error in that, and he is fixing that. Nothing to do with any content of the minutes themselves.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Amended, minutes.
Second.
Moving second. Questions? All those in favor? Opposed. Thank you. Next is receive and review correspondence. Not seeing any. Next is ordinances to consider or introduce. Under discussion items, we did have finance committee listed, but that meeting did not happen this evening either. That's going to be before the next meeting. Okay. Next is agenda items. The first is resolve 2024-10 to approve contract zone for map 002-011 for location of a solar farm if permitted by the planning board.
Just agenda items A and B are both related to the same topic. At the last meeting, the consensus of the council was to have both an approval resolve and a denial resolve on depending on which way the council wished to go. So if you do one and it passes the other ones, you can't pass them both because you have done and undone something. But that's the reason there's 2 items for the same one, is that there was not a clear direction at the last meeting of which one anybody wanted. So they're both there.
Well,
Yes.
what I'd like to add to this is, we started a solar committee in 19, and unfortunately through COVID and stuff, it didn't continue. I believe we need to establish an ordinance in order to have a fair process. We denied a similar applicant in a similar circumstance. I'm of the opinion we need a process in place to regulate and work through.
And put this type of alternative energy in a proper category, not industrial power.
Yeah, and even in industrial, we don't have any parameters around it. We need some parameters around it. Just like we did with the landfill ordinance, we went through it, we found things that, through input that were valuable, and we added to the process, and I feel it's important that we do that with this as well.
I would suggest that if you are going to do with alternative, that fuel cells and wind power, all of those should be addressed in terms of how you wish them outside of the industrial zone, because right now that's the limitation on that if you decide to go that way. I would say that it's possible to do both, to both have a contract zone and establish a process if you have the kind of information that indicates that in doing so, it's furthering a goal that the town has had, or has been part of comprehensive planning, or has been cited as important, and also can be done with caveats to address.
Are you saying it can be done at the same time?
No, I'm saying that starting a process to do an ordinance is going to be a process. We know how long the landfill one took, and that was just one subject as opposed to the multiples. The people asking for the contract zone now have obviously are looking at a time deadline, and whether it's the answer is yes or no, they need that. And if the council were supportive of that, all I would ask is that in supporting that you use examples of ways in which such a project would further goals of the comp plan, identify things that have been seen as important in the community, and how this particular property meets those in terms of perhaps what its former use was and what its new use could be. For example, its former use was providing wood for the mill, which was a major part of the town's operation, and with the closure of the mill, that use for the property was not possible. Its location and topography and et cetera isn't ideal for housing, but the town does have its own solar. It has, and for a location for it which would not be visible from Route 1 or Route 46, and wouldn't be an intrusion in that zone on abutters because of those things. Those kind of items could allow you to say it, to approve that zone. If you, on the other hand, aren't comfortable and want an ordinance in place first, then that, I guess all I'm saying is that the rationale for granting a contract zone needs to be tied in our history, the way we've done it, to things that are identified needs or goals of the community, and how this particular piece of property fits those goals, as opposed to an individual's these can't have names. They need to have, be defensible from legitimate things that way. And I think it's possible to do that, but I would just, as when you're talking about whether you want to do it or not to do it, to utilize those kind of rationalized reasons for the establishment, and even establishing, if you chose to do it, caveats on such a zone, which is this: the installation of this can't be visible from 46 and 1, which we've been told wouldn't be an issue, or something along those. Just a way that in allowing this, you could do so if you chose to. And then also, I do think it's important, we're going to see more applications for other kind of technologies as they emerge, and we should have something in place that adequately addresses them, instead of this round peg in a square hole, or however that goes, which is what we're doing. We're trying to do now, because at the time power generation was developed, we weren't talking windmills. The reason it was in an industrial, because it was diesel engines and gas generation turbines, and associated with the largest. So it's probably more information than you want. I know, Ed, I talk too much, but I'm just outlining sort of for process-wise, what would be good if you were, whichever direction you're going, is if you stick to approaching it in the same way we've approached other contract zones that we've had as to whether they would work or they wouldn't work.
Does anyone have an opinion on how this, I mean, the growth of the town's likely gonna be out in that direction. Does anybody have a thought as to whether that fits in with that?
I do. For this particular scenario, I think the contract zone can definitely be applicable, but I'm very interested in establishing an ordinance for all kinds of forms of energy moving forward.
Yeah.
I'm interested in both of these things that are in front of us, developing things in the ordinance for the future for us, but the logistics of this particular scenario for this contract zone, I'm very interested in seeing happen because of its specific set of circumstances.
To answer your question, Councilor Eastman, I feel the same way, I suppose. I'm certainly in favor of an ordinance so that we can have some sort of framework to this moving forward, because I think these requests are only going to increase rather than be occasional. The other thing I would say is I think in part of that ordinance, I think to what you just highlighted specifically, that the ordinance could state that there can only be X number of, however, whatever the council's pleasure is, but I'm hypothesizing that it could state that there could only be X number of farms in a particular area, solar farms in a particular area, that type of thing. And I think we do, there's nothing as useless as a policy that can't be enforced, but at the same time, I think we want one that is very specific in terms of what we want for Bucksport. If it is a priority, and I'm just saying this because I've heard it a number of times, that these are not visible from whatever vantage point, and I think we need to determine that too, but then we make sure that that's in the ordinance. If we want to make sure that we don't have a 40-acre farm somewhere, or 100 or 400-acre farms, whatever that number is, let's make sure that that's in the ordinance so that people who are coming and applying or want to use, have these, know where they stand. And we're not doing this little dance here. But in terms of what we're considering this evening, I think in terms of what the town manager has brought up, certainly understanding your concerns, Mark, I am in favor of approving it based on the situation itself and the land itself, in terms of the property in question, there being no abutters, this particular piece perhaps not being the best for residential, it not being visible, its prior use, and again, what's already highlighted in the resolve itself, it would need to get all of the permitting and be approved by the planning board. That's me.
I'm in the same belief. I think this project should move forward. It's in the resolve of the being visual from Route 1 and 46. I think that's important to a lot of people in the town. And another part of it is, I don't like treading that line of telling property owners what they can and can't do. I think it can be on a slippery slope there. I know there has to be rules and regulations, of course, but my belief is this project isn't hurting anything. I'm not, no offense to the solar people, but I'm not completely sold that that's the savior, but it's certainly helping and it's moving in the right direction. I'm for this project.
I mean, I'm a fan of solar, totally, but I have reservations that we don't have an ordinance. I guess as long as everybody's on board with creating an ordinance.
Yeah,
I
I would want one by the end of the year if at all possible.
I am absolutely on board with creating an ordinance.
Because I don't want to have these conversations,
Yeah.
kind of scenarios.
Not just solar, but
Yeah.
like we
Solar,
just
wind,
discussed,
fuel cells.
any,
Cells and wind power, all of it.
Just a reminder, we don't have, there hasn't yet to be a motion, so I'm not gonna open it up to public comment yet without the motion.
motion to approve.
Okay,
Second.
moving to second. Any other comments from the council? Anyone from the public?
Hello, folks. My name is Steven St. Peter Jr. I applaud you guys. This is the step in the right direction. As you know, we have a climate crisis going on, and as well as you know, that solar does help with the power grid. And I'm also going to be running for town council as well. But I just want to say that it's great to see great things happening in this town, and I'll let everybody else.
I'm sorry.
No, yep, it's easy to forget, yep. Anyone else? Don, then Luke.
Don White, I think you guys have handled it really well tonight. I think it's pretty obvious as a member of that committee. I think you were the chair, Mark, and Councilor Rankin, you were on it, and we had several of them. We were very close to making a recommendation as to moving forward with an ordinance before the pandemic. I think this particular project would have fit what the thinking of that particular committee was at the time, and it sounds pretty reasonable to me. So I think the ordinance definitely needs to be put in place. There's a lot of variables, but I think these people have been waiting. I think this is a reasonable project, and I would ask you to support it.
I'm gonna be a whiner and a Debbie Downer. First of all, I've got an accessory dwelling unit ordinance that I have to write right now, thanks to the legislature's passing of irresponsible legislation. That's gonna take some time. If I'm gonna write a solar ordinance as well, I'm not opposed to doing it, but it's gonna take some time, and it's not something I can just sit down and bang out.
I think we were thinking just to make sure it's gonna happen, but not.
Yeah, move the ball, I mean.
Moving the ball is fine. Having an end date of the end of the year is.
I rely on you to tell me that date is, yeah, if.
What do you think's reasonable?
I hesitate to. It will take me some time to write it, and then the planning board has to debate it, and or the solar committee if that's going to be involved.
Would it be, we did a moratorium for the landfill ordinance to sort of say, wait just a minute, we need to get this right before we go any further down the road. And we don't have any active other applications for anything other than
For-
this one, right?
Correct. Amoresco has indicated that they might be looking to put more on their site where they're already building.
But they're already permitted for that site.
For the existing 5 megawatts, they're talking about 4 more megawatts. But I haven't got an application yet, so.
So you're saying we might be able to let this go and then enact a moratorium to give us time to, 'cause that would give us a
Just to
year.
give us some time to do that so that we're not doing this.
That's
I
wise.
could get on board with that, cause
Yeah.
I just don't wanna keep doing this and,
Yep.
you know, we told one person one. I
So if
just-
we put forward the same kind of moratorium that says we're gonna look at alternative energy ordinance, because it's not just solar, it's
Right.
the other forms that are already in existence.
Wind power is in our ordinance.
Um,
That was addressed back when the whole windmill phase was going on.
but fuel cells, which I'm not even sure are legal right now, but are coming, there's, whatever we write's gotta address.
With windmills, where are they permitted? Do we have locations where they're permitted?
Yeah, it's in the ordinance. I don't have all the in front of me. I didn't know that was gonna come up tonight, but it is in the ordinance because that was something that was all the rage 10 years ago, and now this is all the rage, so.
Permitted other than residential, not to put you on the spot.
Oh,
I'm
yes.
just curious.
Or
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
other than
Yeah.
industrial?
Yeah.
Oh, I knew there was there used to be
Yeah.
some in residential windmills too, but.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but not much for
Okay.
the commercial. So that was a thing, Orland went through it too. They wanted a bunch up on Dodge Hill, and that was a big to-do, and by the time they got the ordinance written, the people backed out, so, but that anyways.
You just-
And then, yes,
if
the
we do
fuel
that,
cells. I don't really know much
consider
about
a-
fuel cells.
A moratorium, just, even if it's 6 months, it would give whatever committees are supporting this work time to get legwork done and then get it done without us dancing around the,
Yeah.
what's the right answer question.
I have a couple more thoughts on solar was that if we were to do an ordinance and this zone was included in that, as I mentioned at the last meeting, we've got several developers right now that are looking at housing projects, not on her land, but on land that's right nearby. And if we opened that up, then you might see somebody jump at the quick buck of throwing the solar on there and taking away land that's really designated towards housing. That is where the comprehensive plan looked at and said was the most logical place for the town to expand. So, not saying we shouldn't approve this one, but I'm not sure that that land zone would be one that the committee would consider if we do an ordinance.
Keeping in mind for the ordinance, you mean?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, because, I mean, you're talking all out in behind the spring fountain, all of that land all out there is potentially developable, with roads off of Park Street, the extension to Phase 2, and,
Well, also it ties in with water and sewer, which.
Correct. Exactly. So there's a lot to think about there, and a lot of planning stuff that needs to go into that. And then as far as telling people what they can and can't do with their land, I know that stinks, but we do that every day for every person. There's all kinds of things I can't do at my land, and there's things that each one of you can't do at your land. It is what it is. We have all these rules because there would be chaos if we didn't. But I'll leave it at that. Unless you have any questions.
Nope, thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening, Ralph Chapman, School Street, Bucksport. Just very briefly, I'm generally in favor of the concept of this project. And I've had some experience in the past, not only working in the solar materials research industry, but the wind power industry. And I've had experience at public policy making with respect to some of these issues that are coming up, and I'd be more than happy to try to be helpful to you or to the committee that puts together an ordinance. And but I'd like to, in an overall sense, point out that my father had an older friend who published a book in 1935 that described the temporary nature of the fossil fuel use of civilizations. But there was a footnote, and the footnote was referencing a 1903 publication by an Italian chemist. It was called The Father of Photochemistry, that actually recognized the same thing. Now that was in a day when they were not called fossil fuels. The predominant fuel at that time was coal, but we have to adapt to changing circumstances. In my lifetime, civilization has used about a quarter of the known fossil fuels. About half of them have been used since the beginning of the use of fossil fuels. I thought, mistakenly, that the primary reason why we would shift away from fossil fuels is they will run out. What seems to be happening, I thought the pollution created by them would be the secondary motivation, and it seems, if looking at today's world, that the carbon dioxide pollution from burning fossil fuels and the attendant climate change that causes seems to have risen to being the primary cause for shifting away from fossil fuels. Anyhow, I won't belabor that point, but thank you for listening to me.
Just before we take action, moving forward, I know we had a committee before. Was it called the Solar Committee?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. I think probably what we need to do or consider is getting that committee back and running perhaps rebranding it, for lack of a better word, just because of what we've talked about this evening. But I think what this council should be prepared to do is give that committee some pretty high-level guidance on some of the things that we've talked about this evening in terms of here are our priorities for some land use. Specifically to Luke's point, I'll use that. If there's land, for example, behind where the spring fountain currently sits and that whole swath of land there that has a high residential potential, if this council in particular is pretty interested in keeping it that way, then that's something that we should be prepared to communicate to the committee. It's that type of thought process that I think we should, let's get that committee, let's consider getting that committee back up and then making sure that we're prepared to have those high-level conversations.
And the moratorium.
And absolutely, the moratorium, how could that be on the 17th?
The first reading of it could be on it, the public hearing on it could be on September 7th. If you agree to change your meeting date, we're not there yet, from the 17th from the 24th to the 17th, we can have that on the 17th as a first reading and a public hearing and adoption on the 7th.
I'll forget if I don't write it down. I apologize for the delay.
I'll forget it, even if I write it down and have to add a J.
Oh, okay.
This is what happens.
Let's go to the videotape. All right. Any other questions?
Pierre Fitzgerald, Bucksport. For a moratorium, does that have to be townwide, or could it also be a moratorium on solar in areas that are already designated for use in the comprehensive plan?
I don't know if it's designated, Peter.
It's not
I don't think it
designated.
is.
Okay.
To the best of my
Right now, it's only
knowledge.
permitted in the industrial zone, the mill site. So the moratorium would just mean that there'd be you couldn't even do it in the mill site, right?
I think that an ordinance development for a topic is, you can't predetermine the areas that the ordinance itself will determine where it goes, so I'm pretty sure that the moratorium has to address that topic townwide as opposed to only in section A, B, or C.
But it still wouldn't affect the individual homeowner that wants to
No,
put
the
solar.
individual homeowner can do whatever they're doing to solarize their life. I don't even know if that's a word, but
Yeah, it is now.
It
It is now.
So,
All right, thank you.
The only Greg Rosher at New Leaf Energy. I just wanted to confirm a couple things. So with the moratorium in place, would this project be hindered in any way in pursuing a planning board approval, or?
If we approve it now, you're in, and then
Okay.
the moratorium would, the
Is
process would be
after.
Future.
Okay. And the only other thing I just wanted to confirm is what the process would be going forward, in terms of actual contract execution, and finalization. Would that be would a contract owner agreement itself would finalizing a contract like that run in parallel to, us seeking our planning board approval, or, I guess I'm just curious
I don't know,
about how you
there's
see
no
it.
more process if it's approved.
there is a process.
Oh,
We've
sorry.
done it. There is a process. We've done contract zones before. The Horace subdivision up on Silver Lake was a contract zone that wasn't allowed there. There's a document that the council approves that cites the conditions, but it's contingent on approval by the planning board and the DEP, and all of the approval agencies. We don't formally establish that zone like on the earth until you have your permits, so that if something happens in the middle of it, we haven't established a zone that then we have to not do. But it's approved, and you go to the planning board with a yes from the council with whatever, and then the planning board reviews it based on their criteria. And there's a document that just gets signed by the council. It becomes part of the record that makes it allowed to happen there. We have a template to go by, it's not a
Okay.
brand new thing.
So if we get, planning board approval, would we come back to a town council hearing to finalize it?
If
Okay.
our code officer also staffs our planning board and so can keep the council apprised of your progress through the permitting process. And then, because I believe that local permitting is also conditional on state approval, is that correct, Luke?
Say that again?
Local approval is also contingent on state approval. I mean, if you grant a permit, they have to get DEP approval.
Right.
So, everything is kind of joined at the hip. You get individual permissions, but none of them are in effect until you have all of them, shall we say.
Mhm.
But it's not, there's nothing, if the council votes tonight to do this, unless they voted at the very next meeting to reconsider doing it, it's done, You know, it's in terms of the permission.
Thank you.
Susan, did you ever hear anything from the PUC?
Yes, I did. They wrote back and said that, the December 31st, 2024 date, was only, the date wasn't able to be changed, but as has been told to us that, developers can apply for, an extension based on, something that occurred beyond their control. A permitting issue or whatever, but it's not automatic. You know, I would offer, there's hundreds of these projects in the pipeline right now, and in line at the DEP. So I don't know how fast they're cranking them out, but there's a lot of them out there at the moment.
Any other questions? All right, all those in favor? Opposed? Good, thank you. Appreciate the discussion, folks, and the concerns highlighted this evening. Whether they're from the council or from the public, we'll make sure that we account for those as we move forward. So thank you for the discussion this evening. I'll be honest, with the agenda item B, can we just strike that?
Yes, you can
Okay,
just like that.
just wanted to make sure. Thank you. If you are looking at an agenda, you will see that there is item C. We are moving to the August 17th meeting.
Yes, I just want to explain that our assessor has been working diligently to try and get our commitment of this year, and has been met with some challenges in terms of our software because of changes to the software that had to be made to accommodate a stabilization program. It's only going to be 1 year, but it all had to be changed. And then she's also been working on changes to the cost schedules that we've discussed, because our state sales ratio is at 66%. Our homestead people don't get the full value of that, and we also are become in danger of losing percentages of revenue sharing, et cetera, because our ratio is so low. So, and the other thing is that prior to this year, she could try mill rates to see the impact, and this year, every time she does, we have to have IT reset everything in the background, because the software has been changed enough so that that's a bit unwieldy. And I've talked to Caitlin, and I think we both agree that we want this to be right when it comes out, and not something that needs to be adjusted at a later time or causes a whole lot of heartburn. So another 2 weeks, and we should be able to have that valuations are going up, the mill rate is going down. That does not mean that there will not be a tax increase. We've talked about this when we did the budget, that moving those pieces won't negate the fact that there will be an increase, but the degree and how it will impact will also be related to how the cost schedule changes affect property values. So there'll be more explanation on that on the 17th and in the information that comes out about that, but I didn't want you to think that staff wasn't working really hard on this. This is, as I said, been an extremely challenging commitment for a whole lot of reasons, and it doesn't help when your software is not being user-friendly in the process.
So as a result, the first tax bill,
Would not be due, the first half would not be due until September 30th. It normally is the end of August. We're extending the tax due date with the council's blessing from August 31st to September 30th for that first half to avoid interest, to give people that month that they always have after they get their tax bills before they're due. We did this extension in 2020, if you remember. Our bills went out a bit later because of the whole COVID thing, so, and we extended it a month then, and that's what we're looking to do now, so people don't have to worry that they're gonna get it on August 27th and have to run in here 3 days later. That's not the case. That's extended by a month also.
do you need anything specific from the council on that? Just a,
If you object to extending that date, I need to know it now.
No objection.
no objections?
No.
Perfect. Thank you. Next is Resolve 2024-12 to approve the Swings project for the waterfront walkway.
Motion approved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Questions, comments? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Next is resignations, appointments, assignments, and elections. We have none. Approval of quick claims, discharges, and deeds. Again, none. Would you like me to?
I have a couple of items. I don't have anything in writing. I spent much of my week out in the front office this week. So we're going to need a regulatory review committee meeting to talk about the right-of-way next to Dunkin' Donut and the request that we've had by the motel owner to use that as an access to behind their property for development for some additional units. We talked several years ago about abandoning that when someone else was looking at purchasing the property next to Dunkin' Donuts, but we never went through with that, and so I'm gonna need a regulatory review committee meeting to talk about that. And then I've had a very nice lady who is very enthusiastic about pickleball, in to see me a number of times about whether the town was going to do, and we had talked about the possibility of maybe using part of what used, of the skating rink and those kind of things, but we haven't done that. And her question was that at the moment, they're developing some courts in Orland, and that this group, some of which is from Bucksport, are going to be using those, and whether or not the town of Bucksport would be interested in providing any kind of donation to the construction of those courts or whatever for use, so that the people who, since we don't have it here, that they could play in a neighboring community. And I said I would talk to the council about that, which will need a committee. Yes, Mr. Rotella.
So I just got the report back today from SW Cole about the tennis courts and the underlayment at the ice rink. They're gonna come speak to me like I don't understand science next week. But the plan is, in order to move forward with our tennis courts / pickleball courts, the company said they needed to know what was underneath our asphalt, just because of the deteriorating conditions at both. We now do have those reports, and we can apply through the LWCF, which is what we applied for to get that, which provides up to 50% of the funding. So just to leave that out there, we worked on it. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make the deadline this year because the company was backed up in getting their reports done, but I do have it as of today.
I didn't know that, but thank you.
Sorry, yeah, it just came in.
I wouldn't be interested in that at all.
Nope.
Looking at the way things are headed after this round of budgets and our commitments to and the directions that we're headed up, I'd be interested in tightening things, not expanding to.
And we've got our own tennis court and pickleball to deal with, because that's deteriorating and has been for years.
I said I would ask. I'm asking.
Yeah, before I would even want to look at it, hearing what the counselors to my left have said, I would want to, just understand where we are with the tennis courts first and decide if there's any pleasure or thought of putting money towards that. That would be the priority before we put money in. So yeah, that's where I am on it.
Alrighty. And the only other one was if you're willing to move the 24th to 17th.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll have the 17th, and then the first meeting in September will be the 7th. We'll have moratorium introduction, we'll have the PPI introduction, we'll have the animal shelter introduction.
So make sure we're there on the 7th.
So make sure you're there on the
17th.
17th and the 7th.
What time do you want to start on the 17th, just regulatory review prior? Oh, wait, till we get down there.
About the right-of-way item, I think we started at 6:30. I think there's only so much to.
It's actually Miles Lane, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Miles Lane Trail.
It is, but
yeah.
it's kind of, you have to go through Wendell, because
Yes.
that got constructed after it was.
Yeah. Okay.
And he'd asked for permission to clear some of it so you could use it to access them, but then my concern is that if everybody all the way up through starts doing the same thing and there's a steady stream of people, we're gonna have issues with.
Well, and also what DOT's gonna think of that with, Dunkin' Donuts has its issues anyway with traffic.
Yep.
And we need to, I would prefer before I said yes to anybody about that we had enough of a conversation to understand what the
Agreed.
pluses and minuses of that might involve.
Okay.
So 6:30 on the 17th for regulatory review?
Yep.
Got it. Okay. That was the next item on the agenda, to set public hearings and or hold public hearings and approval of any licenses or permits. Do we have any other meetings that need to occur on either the 7th or the 17th?
I have a quick question. So does that mean we're not gonna meet September 14th?
September 24th, you mean?
Well, no, the meeting should have been September 14th and September 28th.
The 24th is this month, August, right?
Yeah, the 24th is
17th.
Yeah, I'm talking about September, if you're move me, just because I'm trying to do that, finance committee meeting and also the Spirit of America Award.
The reason I said the 7th is that's the last date that Jacob can have anything and still get it on the ballot.
The very last day.
What's that?
The very last day.
The very last
That's
date
cut it to the wire.
that
And
we
you're
can.
excited.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, Rich, I would think common sense says we would skip the meeting
We
on the
would
14th.
skip the 14th and do the 7th.
Okay.
What did we just do to you?
This will be the 5th time I'm changing that Spirit of America Award, but I'll deal with the people. It's okay.
Thank you, Rich.
Yeah, that's okay.
Well, some of the things that we're trying to get to referendum aren't in my hands right now, so I can't put them on agendas. So, when I can do that, we'll hopefully stop moving meetings around.
I will not be able to make the 7th meeting.
Okay. there's 6 other people that are at this table, hopefully they
Yep.
can do that.
Let's see, next item is discussion of items not on the agenda for the council of the public. Anybody on the council have anything? I have something briefly, just, and it's the town manager's favorite subject, but it's something I do wanna bring up to the council, and I'll probably bring it up again next time too. I think that, as we discussed earlier this year, the town manager has set a date, for when, she may no longer be the town manager, and I would say in public that that's of her volition. And so I think it would behoove this council to begin to, consider, putting together the process of, prioritization around what, we would like to see in our next town manager, et cetera, et cetera. It's a conversation I wanna have with the mayor, et cetera, but I just wanted to put it out there that I think it's time that we begin to put together a committee, toward that end.
What's the goals?
As much as I don't like it, even though I seem to be the only one that brings it up sometimes, makes me your favorite person. But yeah, it's one of our most important jobs is to do this, so anyway. Just wanted you to know that I hadn't forgotten about that. I hadn't brought it up in a while, so I didn't want you to think I was slipping.
Okay.
Yep, and you hadn't made that face in a while, so I was starting to wonder.
Well, it's kind of awkward, but
It is.
I mean, this is my decision, 12/31/25, and we are at, you know, beyond mid-2023, and, it would be really good if you had a clear idea of what you were looking for before you started.
There should be a lot of input. It should not be the 7 of us that make that, well, let me be clear, I think it should be the 7 of us that make that final decision, but the 7 of us should, have received as much input, around, what the community wants to see in their next town manager. And that's going to take time, and you start that process 3 or 6 months out and you're gonna fail, so. I'll stop now.
That's perfectly okay.
Let's see, we already took care of the public hearings and committee, meetings, so anything from the public, anything at all before okay? Adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Second, all those in favor? Opposed. Thank you, everyone, have a good night.